How can busy professionals find time to exercise? I think that this is the question that everyone needs to consider, and it's not just busy professionals, because who do you know who's not, quote unquote, busy? Welcome to the show where we help you make smart nutrition simple. If you want proven nutrition strategies to help you build a better body and create the energy to show up for your family without overly restrictive and unrealistic dieting, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and enjoy this episode. What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. I'm your host, as always, Ben Brown, head coach and owner here at Body Systems, where we help you change the belief system around what it means to be healthy. And we do that through our online nutrition and fitness coaching services. Now, you guys know my goal with this podcast is to provide the most straightforward, practical, and strategically simple fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and fat loss resources possible so that you can achieve your best with less. And in today's Q&A episode, I'm going to tackle a very common challenge, right? Because we're all busy. And so it begs the question of how can we, as busy people, prioritize exercise and nutrition, especially in the face of overwhelming challenges, because we all go through these times when we feel overwhelmed with all of the things on our plate, and that's okay. And so what I can hopefully shed some light on in this conversation is the different ways to look at it and different ways where we can strategically build our programs in realistic ways. And so I'm going to cover the importance of prioritizing your health. We'll talk about why strength training is crucial for fat loss and longevity, and how to balance your daily stress with the right type of movement. Spoiler alert, not all movement is beneficial for stress relief. Really important concept that we're digging into in today's episode. So without further ado, let's jump right in. How can busy professionals find time to exercise? I think that this is the question that everyone needs to consider, and it's not just busy professionals, because who do you know who's not, quote unquote, busy, right? And it's all this perception of like we've got and commit to so many things, but at the end of the day, it's really just how are we prioritizing the things that matter? And so the conversation that we have with clients, whether it's a housewife or a stay-at-home dad or an executive woman or CEO man, it doesn't matter, right? We've all got commitments that we make. It begs the question of just like how important are these commitments and how do we prioritize ourselves amongst all of these things? And are we being considerate about how we prioritize them? Meaning, are we putting these things that matter on our calendar, right? Because invariably we have all of our work commitments on our calendar, but do we have our family commitments on our calendar? Do we have our personal health and fitness commitments on our calendar? And one of the sayings that we have, that we speak to clients about is show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And so, just yesterday I had a conversation with a client and she was feeling very defeated. And she was feeling very stressed and very anxious and very quote unquote unmotivated, which is not uncommon, by the way. And as we started to kind of hash out the conversation, it became very clear that she was lacking structure. She was lacking consistency. She was prioritizing everyone and everything else in her life and giving her time to everyone else who quote unquote needed it, but wasn't making the time for herself. And so the conversation became, well, if these things are important to you and you say this is what you want to feel healthier, you want to have more energy, you want to look better, you want to feel more confident, right? You want to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your kids, so that you can be around for a really long time. Well, we're both in agreement that we need to figure out ways to move more consistently, to prioritize your meals, to have time to plan and prepare. But if we're not structuring that into our day, it's not just going to happen by magic, right? And that's where we have to be very intentional about it. And so then the conversation became, okay, well, pull up your calendar. Let's take a look. When are you going to exercise? And she said, well, I typically try and exercise in the morning, and if I don't get it done, no, that wasn't the question. When are you going to exercise? Let's put it in your calendar so that it is non-negotiable, right? Just like you had a work meeting, just like you're taking the kids to sports, right? Just like you have a therapy appointment, whatever it is, right? You're not going to bail on those appointments because something came up, because it's a priority. Same goes for our health and fitness. And so we literally will pull out the calendar. We'll block it in the calendar. We'll block meals on the calendar. We'll block shopping, prepping, cooking, meal delivery, saying, you know what? You don't want to spend the time shopping? Get Instacart. They'll deliver it right to your door. And so there's really no excuses for not doing it if you say it's something that's important to you. So why is strength training so important for fat loss, especially as we get older? And, one of the things that we are realizing about the value of strength training, particularly the value of lean muscle tissue as we get older, is just the correlation with lean muscle mass and strength specifically to longevity, to quality of life. And so basically, the more muscle mass we have, the more strength that we have, obviously to a degree, as we age, the longer we're going to live, the better quality life we're going to live, the more healthy and functional we're going to be. And I think if you're listening to this and you have, so I'm 45, my parents are kind of those baby boomer parents. So, my parents are in their mid 70s. And what we're seeing with a lot of our parents, if you're in the same, age bracket as me, or you've already, maybe your parents are a bit older, or you saw, their end of years, is we're seeing the implications of basically weakness on the body, on quality of life. The inability for older people to be able to function in ways that they want to function, the inability for them to be able to contribute to society in any meaningful way, to be able to do the things that they want to do. And it's pretty depressing. And so that really begs the question of, well, what do we need to do in our earlier years to set the stage for a healthy life long term? And all of that comes down to movement, to muscle mass, to strength, and doing everything that we can to build that foundation while we have the opportunity. And so, of course, it starts when we're kids, of how physically active are we? How are we infusing these habits, skills, traits into our children to want to be physically active, to embrace sports, to embrace fitness, to embrace strength training to the degree that they can, because no longer are the days where we live on farms and we're, exerting ourselves by lifting and carrying and pushing and pulling and doing all of the things that humans were forced to do for hundreds of thousands of years, right? In the advent of the agricultural revolution here, and now especially over the past 100 years, where I just mentioned, for Christ's sakes, getting food delivered to our door, we could literally sit on the couch and not have to go anywhere, work from home, order food all day. We don't have to move anymore. And that in and of itself is very, very, very problematic. So strength training is super important for longevity, and of course it's important for fat loss too. And the thing that we need to take into consideration is, especially as it revolves around fat loss, is that most people want to improve body composition. All right, we talk about weight loss. A lot of people have a lot of body fat to lose, but what most people really want is, it doesn't matter so much what we see on the scale, but how our clothes fit, how we feel like we look. And this is the difference between weight loss and fat loss, is what most people in my experience want, is they want to lose a lot of body fat. They want to maintain, if not improve, lean muscle tissue, because that's what gives us a more aesthetically appealing look. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by strength training, by maintaining, if not improving, lean muscle tissue, especially while we're dieting. And the main thing to take into consideration during dieting phases is that when we're in a calorie deficit, our body's pulling resources from not just body fat, but also from lean muscle tissue, connective tissue, bone. And so what we see on DEXA scans that look at all body tissues is when people are in an aggressive deficit, they're going to lose oftentimes equivalent amounts of body fat and muscle tissue, especially if they're not being physically active. And we see this quite a lot now. We're seeing this a lot with weight loss drugs like GLP-1 agonists, semaglutide, the Wegovy, the Ozempic, even the tirzepatide, like the Mounjaro. All this GLP and GIP agonist receptor drugs, because they're curbing people's appetites to such a degree, people are losing a lot of weight very quickly. But if they're not already in the habit of being physically active, then they're going to be losing a lot of muscle tissue in the process. And as I explained, like, it's one thing from a fat loss standpoint, but it's another thing from like just a health, longevity, quality of life standpoint as well, that we absolutely need to take into consideration. And the last part about this that I think is worth mentioning is, especially for women over 40, as women start to enter this perimenopausal period, understanding that their ability to build and maintain lean muscle tissue drops drastically after menopause because of the decline of estrogen and the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. They lose a lot of their ability to hold on to that muscle tissue, especially if they don't have a lot of muscle tissue to begin with, or they haven't been physically active up until that point. And so it's never too late to start. But in my opinion, the more muscle mass that a woman can have in her earlier years, one, she's going to look better, she's going to feel better, she's going to have more energy, she's going to have a healthier hormonal function. Two is the more she's setting herself up for long-term success. And honestly, I could say the same thing for men too, because with men, we're seeing that testosterone is rapidly dropping year after year. And so the more muscle that we can build earlier on in our life, it's just going to make everything else easier over the long term. So the question is there a connection between stress and fat storage? And there's definitely a connection, but it's kind of a roundabout connection in terms of, we've talked about stress. We've talked about the stress hormone cortisol. And a lot of people will talk about how, quote unquote, stress makes you fat. And while there's not necessarily like this direct correlation of like, if I produce more cortisol, we can see, from the research that people who produce more cortisol are fatter. I don't think that exists. But what we do know is the lifestyle that people live that lends itself to living in more of a stressed out state will then contribute to the behaviors that are going to contribute to gaining body fat by virtue of poor sleep quality, by virtue of poor eating behaviors, by virtue of poor structure, consistency, lack of schedule. I think all of those things seem to be, in the research, they're called confounding variables, right? So where I said, people who produce more cortisol are fatter. We can't make that correlation. However, the confounding variables here are people that are more stressed out, don't sleep as much. They eat more sugar. They eat more frequently. They don't plan and prepare their meals as much. They don't structure an exercise or are less likely to exercise as much. They have less lean muscle tissue. And so I think for all of these reasons, we could say that one of the best things that people can do is to find more ways to manage the stress that they experience in their life and put themselves in positions that contribute to lower amounts of perceived stress. And here's where it's important to consider. Stress is very individualized, right? We can think about something awful happening, like just turn on the news, just watch the debate that was just on. And all you need to do is literally think about it, and your heart rate's going to go up, your blood pressure is going to go up, your stress hormones are going to go up. And the reason I bring this up is because stress, again, is very individualized to the degree that we all know people who are constant stress balls, who are fretting over every single thing in their life, that many of which they have no control over, versus we all know the people who are just chill, like regardless of what's going on, they're just calm and cool and, water off a duck's back. And I think it's important to acknowledge what type of person you are and then actively work to put yourself in positions where you're going to be able to control those stressors to the degree that if I find every time I'm scrolling social media and I'm following people that spin me up, well, maybe I unfollow them, or maybe I get rid of social media altogether. If I know that, every Monday morning I have a crazy workload starting first thing in the morning and I'm dreading it all weekend, maybe it would make sense for me to push those meetings to later on in the week and give myself more time, right? Like there's a lot of things that are in our control that we don't acknowledge, which by focusing on those would help make everything else in our life better, help us manage our stress better, and invariably probably make it easier to lose body fat. Does physical activity help reduce stress? And that's a great question because it depends on the type of physical activity. So what a lot of people don't realize is physical activity in and of itself is a stressor, especially at higher levels of intensity. So if we think about going and challenging ourselves in the gym, doing a boot camp class, doing a spin class, maybe we go to F45 or we do a hard HIIT workout, and maybe we feel better after. What we don't realize is that was a very stressful event on the body. Now, that's not a bad thing, and the way the body responds is to adapt. And so stress is a good thing. It's just the amount, the time, the intensity of the stress that we need to be considerate of. And so for a lot of clients who experience a tremendous amount of stress, oftentimes what we'll do is we'll actually back down on the intensity of their exercise. Now, the one form of exercise that's actually a very strong stress reliever is lower intensity forms of cardiovascular exercise. That could look like just walking. It could look like just biking. It could look like an easy hike. It could look like a swim. And doing those forms of physical activity where our heart rate is lower end up being very parasympathetic. And parasympathetic is our kind of rest and digest and recover area of our nervous system. And the more we can infuse that, again, because I've talked about how we experience so much stress now with everything that we do, including the things that we see constantly and think about, like news, social media, artificial lights, like we're constantly on. And so the more things that we can do, like and this is one of the reasons why walking is such a valuable fat loss tool, is it's not about burning calories, but it's about activating our parasympathetic nervous system. It's about giving our body the ability to rest and digest and recover. It's about stimulating blood flow. It's about kind of reducing those stress hormones and stimulating cognitive function. So that's where being cognizant of the form of exercise and the stress that it's inducing is important. And the more exercise and movement that we can do that is low levels of stress, the better, in my opinion. Well, there you have it. That's it for this episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. If you have questions that you'd like us to tackle in an upcoming episode, then we can't wait to hear from you. So you can submit your questions directly by just messaging us on our social media. That's at Body Systems Coaching. Or you can just message me personally, ben@bodysystems.com. Appreciate you guys listening, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this content valuable, here are 4 ways I can help you in your nutrition journey for free. 1. Grab a free copy of my Fat Loss Fix Guide at fatlossfixguide.com. 2. Join my free group at smartnutritionmadesimple.com. 3. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at smartnutritionmadesimpletv.com. 4. Leave a 5-star rating and positive review so that we can gain access to more nutrition experts ready to share their knowledge with you and ultimately help more people make smart nutrition simple.